It is 10 a.m. in Washington, D.C., 1 minute after 3 p.m. in Yaoundé, Cameroon, and you are welcome to join us here. I am Angie Forbin, and if you're joining us live, we are on Facebook. The name is the same as the handle, and on YouTube, it's the same as well. Cameroon is at the serious crossroads, and what we know as of today is that top allies of TCHIROMA have been picked up by military forces, as well as hundreds of other young people. What we know as well is that yesterday, hundreds of people were bundled from the Biketeri neighborhood in Yaoundé, but also across the country after protests sparked, calling on the Yaoundé regime to respect the results of the ballot after the presidential election of the 12th of October, where TCHIROMA is claiming victory with an over 50% lead in the last race, a thing that the Biya regime does not like to hear. In fact, they have called it illegal for him to have declared that he won the elections. We've seen a plethora of ministers and high-ranking Biya regime officials come out to condemn him and to call for peace. Peace is agitated in a manner that is considered by many political pundits as really just a threat that comes before the arrest that we have seen. Some of the names we will find out today of the people who have been arrested. Fabrice Lena, who happens to have been the campaign manager of Ateki Seta Carsten during the last presidential election, was picked up yesterday after declaring that he was that TCHIROMA, beyond any questionable doubt, had won the election. But also, we're learning as of this morning that Professor Abba Oyono, who was a close aide of TCHIROMA throughout the election campaign trail, was picked up this morning at his residence in Oja. Yesterday, Anissa Ekane and Joachim Chameni were arrested, and this would not be their first times to find themselves in detention. We all know in the 80s that they were picked up for their political convictions as well. And so what is interesting is that we are seeing history repeat itself for more than the first time. We are seeing history since the 90s, the return to multi-party politics, sadly repeat itself, but at levels that are so horrifying that one begins to question ourselves whether we are living on the same planet as all the other countries that have experienced loss and have decided to steer their countries in the right directions with regards to democracy and good governance. Joining me this morning are a host of people who are well known and well read and who have a solid mastery of the political stakes of what is happening right now. They lived through the 80s, they lived through the years of political unrest in our country, and they are here to share with us their views, their perspectives, and some very serious facts that closely relate to what we are seeing happen right now. Ekine Agboambai happens to be a Harvard-trained scholar, but also was one of the star boys of the Herald newspaper in the 90s. And so he knows the inner works of Cameroonian-style politics. And he has lived through quite a few interior ministers and would share with us his perspective. We also have joining us Levin Bushu, who is a political analyst and many things, currently leading a peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We would also have on this panel Chrétien Tabeting, who happens to be an SDF stalwart in the days when the SDF was the SDF. He's retired from politics, but still he has a strong voice and he has lots of experience he will be sharing with us. I'm Angie Forbin. You are live on Facebook and on YouTube. Ekine, Levy, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so very much for having me, Angie.
The pleasure is all ours. The pleasure is mine.
Pleasure is ours.
I'll start with you. I'll start with you, Ekine. Of course, the arrests, Fabrice Lena, Anissa Ekane, Joachim Chameni, and this morning on confirmed sources are saying Professor Abba Oyono. All of them have something in common. They are allies of TCHIROMA, who has declared himself the winner of the election and has dared the government to prove the contrary. Is history not repeating itself?
History is not repeating itself in this context because the regime is just running the old playbook. So if you assume that history is repeating itself, it's like we didn't see it coming. Everybody knows that this regime thrives on fear. So what they're trying to do is to instill fear in the population. But most importantly, they're trying to isolate the candidate, the president-elect TCHIROMA, from his situation room. So he will be unable to meet with his aides to strategize and design ways that can go and mobilize the people to come out and defend their vote. Now, the question is, we can say history is repeating itself, but that is a standard modus operandi of the regime. They are not doing anything that is new. We knew this was coming because everybody's calling for peace, as you said. Peace. You cannot be calling for peace while you are militarizing the streets and you are arresting citizens and calling for peace. There's no peace without justice. So history repeating itself to an extent, yes, but surprising to me, no. I saw it coming. I knew it was going to come. That's the same thing. They will go on Monday. They will announce the results that Biya won with some imaginary number that they concocted by Lekam. And then people will try to come out and protest. They will shoot, kill a few, arrest, water cannon, tear gas the population, and then apply the iron grip, and then hope that things will maybe subside. People will give up, shrug their shoulders. The docile population, of course, they will continue life, business as usual. That's the regime. The only problem we have now is that the person at the helm, we are talking about a 93-year-old man who is facing creeping senility or tottering on the borders of senile decay, who has lost his grip on power. He doesn't even know where he is. If Biya was in the US, he'll be in a nursing home. And he'll be wearing diapers and being assisted with activities of daily living. That is where the problem is. The system is fracturing because the center is old. We are not talking about Biya in 1992 or Biya in 2008 or Biya in 2011. We are talking about a 93-year-old man. So that's the problem. Because within the factorization of the regime, internal dissensions, there are camps. The camps that hold power, who are the just JJCs who just came in and gongos. And then the people like Eso, Sadi, Rene, and the others who have been with the president through the thick and thin. And they are like, who are these young people just coming to tell us the president had decayed, the president has said that, and there's no way to verify it. So that is where the situation is different this time.
So, Levy, tell us, is this the arrest that we've seen, the crackdown, the threats, the demonization, is this the desperate moves of a regime that is running on fumes?
Yes, Angie, I'd say these are the last kicks of a dying horse. Now, but how does a dying horse get to accept that it's game over for a regime that, like Ekine said, has stagnated us for 30 plus decades? It's alarming. And when you see the spate of arrests, crackdowns, repression here and there, and people not wanting to accept that the clock has been ticking, and then they didn't see the tick-tock says the clock coming until Chiroma rose from nowhere. I like the way Chiroma puts it. He says amongst them, they didn't find a coalition, but the people said, okay, you don't want to find a coalition, but we, the people, would form a coalition around you. They didn't see it coming. They focused all their energy on Kamto, and then when it turned out they had pushed him aside, they didn't know this was going to happen. And now they're going on a rampage. They're going on a rampage because they didn't imagine that their own people would take the bags of rice, the yards of cloth, and the tablets of soap and still go vote for change. That's what they want. That's what they expected. But then, unfortunately for them, they are stonewalled and they are bound to go back to their old playbooks, like Ekine was saying. This is what they used back in 92. Angie, maybe you were not born at the time, but in repression.
You can't say that.
I remember I was in Bamenda on the day the elections results were announced in 1992. Bamenda went up in fumes, and so did the rest of the country. It was cry the beloved country. And then when that dark page passed, we didn't know that things would come to where they are coming again. Now, unfortunately for these people, I'm remembering something Ekine was saying about being senile. I think somewhere we read that a senile dog's death begins by making it deaf. When the dog begins to die, it stops hearing. No amount of advice, no amount of caution, no amount of finger pointing can halt the last steps or the last mad steps of a senile dog. But then that's sad enough as it is, Angie. What with the arrest of people with no charges levied on them just because yesterday they had sided with someone they believed had won, and then we see the way things are coming. We see the way, were it not because of the wall of the popular mass that had built around Chiroma's home, I'm sure he would have been picked. Nobody saw it coming. So, yes, it's marks of fear. It's marks of something they had not foreseen. But I believe that instead of going back to old tactics, old tricks, which would further plunge the country into some bottomless pit, it's just about time they stood up on their feet. It's just about time they came to understand that, yes, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But then they should know that whatever happens, I said it yesterday to someone in a conversation, that you can fool some people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can never fool all the people all the time. And that exactly is what's happening today, Angie.
At the center of this post-electoral crisis, the proclamation of results, which have been postponed to the 27th. Some legal pundits argue that the 27th is a day too late per the Constitution, where Section 137 tells us that from the end of polling, you begin to count, and you count 15 days. So the polling day was on the 12th. Some legal luminaries say that it would normally be on the 26th, but others say in Cameroonian practice, it usually would be from the following day, so the 27th is the deadline. But still, TCHIROMA declaring his victory the following day, and the regime thinking that, or dismissing the claims very sternly as false, creates this problem, right? Where the question keeps coming up: do we need 15 days to declare results, to proclaim results, when in Senegal, the same day the winner of the election is known? In the United States, even more so. Do we need a 15-day deadline to count results and to know the winner? Ekine.
Obviously, the answer is no. We don't need 15 days. And the reason is simple. The results are known after 6 p.m. on the day of voting. Every other layer that the government or the CPDM, I don't want to call it a political party because the CPDM is not a political party. It's a special purpose vehicle of self-interest and contending impulses revolving around one man. What we are talking here is a system of state capture by a vampire elite. So the 15 days is to provide them a wide angle of maneuver for all the electoral malpractices that you see, all these electoral shenanigans that they are trying to apply to falsify tally sheets and do all of that. Now, the question becomes, based on whether you get 15 days or 5 days or 10 days, at the end of the polling, Article 113 says the polling officer, they will count as a public exercise, and each polling station will declare who has won. I saw Atanganji go rampaging and was getting angry and so belligerent and bellicose, trying to intimidate Michelle Doki for creating a platform where, people can just go there, use their smartphones to take a photo of the results as they are published, and then upload it to that platform so that anybody can go there and collate the figures themselves. It's that simple. We are in 2025. We are not in the 1970s or 80s or 90s. Now, so we don't need 15 days at all. And what is this whole idea of trying to count votes, that you have to create a committee to count votes? The results are already known. Chiroma knew he had won the elections and he could accept it and claim it based on the demographics. I did an article which I think was published in newspapers in Cameroon and online, I said the numbers don't lie. Why it is mathematically impossible for Paul Biya to win the 2025 elections based on the trends that are coming from the polling stations. Yeah, because as I said before, in that article, there are 18 main divisions in the country based on election data from 2018 and 2025. There are 18 main divisions that have over 80% of the electorate. Unfortunately, none of those divisions are in the English-speaking regions. Not Faku, not Meme, not Mezam, not Bui. So in Littoral, you have Mongo and Vori. In the center, you have Fundi. I think, where else? In the east, you have Lome Jerem. You have Mayo Dana, you have Benue, Mayo Kani, Mayo Sara, Mayo Sanaga. Most of those divisions are in the north. So if you collect the results, because the argument which I've heard some of the CPDM regime apologists make, which doesn't make sense to any person who understands how the electorate is structured. They say, oh, the opposition never had, I think Jean Momo Didi or one of those other buffoons, the opposition didn't have representation in all the 31,000 polling stations. Is that a condition for victory? Or is that a criteria for CPDM ballot stuffing? Elecam, you are the electoral umpire. You are supposed to organize elections, free and fair elections. So back to your point, we don't need 15 days. The elections should be proclaimed. The results, the winner should be known not later than maybe 2 or 3 or 4 hours after the polls close on election day. We don't.
Can I come in, Angie,
Thank you
and to add?
so much. Absolutely. You can come in, but the question I wanted to ask you real quick was the National Vote Counting Committee, because we've seen the electoral law has kind of evolved from the 90s when Frundi from every evidence won the election. What differs now between that era and now with regards to compiling and proclaiming the results?
Well, if you want me to say, in 1992, first of all, that was the first presidential elections, the second multi-party elections. The first one were the legislative elections in March. At that time, the law said the divisional electoral committees proclaimed the results. That's why the March 1992 legislative elections remain the only truly credible elections that has held under Paul Biya since the return to multipartyism in 1990. And that elections, the CPDM lost. Now, you come back to a place where in 1992, the Ministry of Territorial Administration was central to the electoral process. And Chungi was key. So they can create a national voters commission, a vote counting commission. And then the parties, the members of that commission were put there numerically based on the party's representation in parliament. So the CPDM had a majority of the members there. So when two paves clash, they'll put it to a vote. Which one they should accept, the one that the CPDM has or the one that the opposition have. And obviously the CPDM, they had a numerical advantage. So they voted to uphold the CPDM on after they had rigged the elections. We all know the elections were rigged. Abin Zongang has said it several times, so many other people have said it. So this time around, it took us 2 months to get the results of the 1992 presidential elections. So the government learned its lessons, and they always change the law. They always try to change the law. For every election, they learn where things went wrong. But this time, the numbers just rebelled against them. The difference is not political, it's mathematical. Biya cannot win. Even if Biya wins every rural vote in every ballot box, you end up with 34% of the total electorate of that 8 million, assuming that we have a 100% participation. Nobody goes into a ballot box after 43 years of stagnation and national decay, and you put a 93-year-old man to continue running the affairs of your country. Are you serious? The CPDM people are not even making this argument. They are even ashamed. What has been Biya's record after 43 years? That's a question. A president, an incumbent is a referendum. An election with an incumbent is a referendum on that incumbent. Look at 43 years of Paul Biya. You think it's only Cameroonians who are suffering? Go to the South region. The South region is one of the most underdeveloped regions in the country, maybe after the East. Go and see the poverty in the South. You think people are not tired? Most importantly, just look at even the campaign. Did the CPDM even run? Is that how you run a presidential campaign? They put in 11 billion francs CFA and made gadgets from condoms to umbrellas to savons to chocolate and all things. And then the material arrived late. Yes.
Levy, how do you explain that despite the lack of mobilization on the part of the candidate of the CPDM, they land these Sovietic scores over the years? Does this have everything to do with the fraud that Ekina has been describing, the cooking of election results?
Exactly. And that's what we've witnessed all over the years. From 1992, we saw it, the succeeding elections after that time. All of this is a well-planned, the machine has been well-oiled from that time, and that's what happens when you have a state party, a party that taps from state resources, both human, logistics, financial, you name it. So it's something that's well orchestrated even before the elections are even planned and run and even budgeted for, and all of that. So it goes without saying that when they put all of this in place, and mind you, dear friends, what they do is that they surreptitiously make administrators to know that they work for the party, and that party is the state. It's a shame we have such a thing in our system, and it's already in the collective DNA of the way the system functions. Otherwise, how would you explain that administrative officials in all the 10 regions of the country, in all the divisions and the subdivisions, already know that they're answerable to one man, the Minister of Interior, and then he tells them, you know what, you have one assignment wherever you are on voting day, make sure that this candidate, the ruling party, the candidate of the ruling party wins. Otherwise, you're going to be dealing with a hot potato. So they do everything from bribery, from corruption, from intimidation, from outright threats that they met out to citizens, and they make sure that their country, the party wins. Something happens every day on voting day in Cameroon, be it legislative or presidential elections. Their party bigwigs go from polling station to polling station with envelopes, and they try to bribe. They actually bribe people, chairpersons of polling stations, to change or to doctor the results. It's in the system, so they know it, and they allow it to go in such a way that it's not reported most of the time. They bribe their way through. They say, oh, that's the system. We can't change it. Only this time around, they met their Waterloo. So that's what they've been doing. How would you explain the fact that we've seen it on social media? A DO in a particular subdivision goes on air and announces that in his constituency, there were 100 registered voters. And then results come out, and we see in return sheets from Elecam, and it states that over 15 to 16,000 persons came out and voted. 15,000 voting for the CPDM. How on God's earth do we have that? And strange enough, Elecam refuses to question that. Elecam refuses to look into that. But we are on the brink of witchcraft. I wonder who bewitched us. That's the question on every lip. How do we do? And that's what they've been doing. Now, the only thing is they didn't see this coming. They didn't see this popular uprising coming. They didn't know that the people would stand up at some point and say, enough is enough. So that's the only way. That's the only thing that explains. I hope that this time it will ring through. But then, like we say, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Yeah, they want to keep doing that.
How do we explain that Elecam has remained tight-lipped to the very strong allegations of fraud. I mean, with video evidence that we have seen erupt from different regions of the country, with the numbers that don't seem plausible. I mean, he just spoke of Donga Mantung, I believe, but also in the Ndian, we saw results that really didn't make sense, because these are regions that are deserted because of the Anglophone crisis, but also because civilians have been murdered on Mr. Biya's orders, right? How do you explain that Elecam has remained tight-lipped? I mean, earlier last week, the president of the Electoral Board had come out to say that we should trust in the electoral process, but did not say a thing about the allegations of fraud, of massive rigging. The National Vote Counting Commission sat during and it ended, I think, on Sunday. They said they don't have the power to even listen to any revendications or any doubts that were cast on the credibility of the votes. At the Constitutional Council, it's almost expected what the results will be per the last presidential election.
So,
where do opposition leaders who have a strong claim of irregular elections go to? Why is all the organs that are in charge of ensuring per the Constitution a free and fair election tight-lipped at this time?
You see, that question is loaded, and the question speaks directly to the challenges of standing up to the system. Because the regime is no longer a regime, and Biya is no longer just the president of Cameroon. Biya is the system. Elecam, you asked the question, to your point, it is impunity. They don't care. You think Elecam cares about what you think? You think Elecam cares about what your vote will do? It's state captured by a vampire elite. They constitute part of that elite. Eno Abrahams, all the members, Madame Joma, Tambetiko, all those people there, they are there to defend their personal interest. They don't care about the country. They don't care about you. They don't care about those millions of people they see on the streets. That is impunity. And that's why they do what they do, because they have captured the state. Now, when the state is captured by a vampire elite, the institutions are hollowed out. You don't expect Elecam to function or the Constitutional Council to do their jobs when they have been reduced to uncircumcised appendages of the regime. He appoints the chairman, the board chairman of Elecam, appoints the director general, he appoints the president of the Constitutional Council and all the members. You saw when the current president, Clement Atangana, was appointed. In his house, he was on retirement. I started dancing. He didn't even look at the heavy responsibilities that he had been called upon to assume. It was just another opportunity, they said, to come and chop. So the system is Biya, and Biya is a system, and only Biya can deconstruct the system. Because the day is no longer there, the whole pernicious enterprise will unravel. Now, there are options where people can stand up. A peaceful, non-violent one is the long, obvious one that might force the system to crumble under its own contradictions and tensions. But the most logical and obvious one in the face of all the gaslighting is people power. As we saw in Burkina Faso, I know people are afraid to say it because they will also appel at insurrection. The government has put all these laws that it is even forbid you to talk about the health of a 93-year-old man. In America, where we are, the health of the president is of so much paramount importance that when you are running for president, you have to have a clean bill of health so that people know that you have the mental acuity to execute the office of president. See? So Cameroon, either you go through people's power, which is the most logical option when you push people to the wall, right? And all that pent-up anger and emotion is going to explode on the streets. Now, the institutions, as Biya has corroded all our institutions, the judiciary is an appendage of the regime, parliament is just a rubber stamp, and then the president is l'état c'est moi, and then the army is just not there. The army is structured in a way that it is meant to defend the regime. I was talking to a general once. I said something very, very instrumental, which struck me. He said, if it was the opposition party that were in power and the CPDM was the opposition, if you exchange roles, the opposition will do the same thing that the CPDM is doing. So don't expect the army to come and help you take power or remove your opponent from power. They will not do it.
Yeah. Levy, why do you think that it is so difficult for the army, as he says, to be neutral, even though they say it officially? I mean, last week, the army spokesperson came out and in a statement said that the army was neutral with regards to elections. Another former senior military official of the Cameroonian army, a former spokesperson, in an interview I had with him a week ago or two, said the same thing, but on the ground, the impression is that they are weaponized by the executive to harm and to crack down on dissidents. Do you think in such a dispensation it is possible for Cameroonians to confidently go out in the streets and peacefully make their voices heard and put an end to the 43-year-old Biya regime?
I want to believe that that's possible because every drug has an expiry date. Every drug has an expiry date. The problem with Cameroon is institutional, is systemic. When we don't have strong institutions, when you don't have institutions where there is a clear demarcation, a clear distinction between the executive and other branches of government, where the executive is preponderant, where the executive seems to have superpowers over all the branches of the government, where we have these very Machiavellic moves on the eve of an election where the president of the republic comes out and appoints new generals. That's a message which is almost very clear, hidden in plain sight, telling them that, okay, you know, we are on the eve of an elections and you know where your loyalty should lie.
You're assuming that the president Levy, that is the president who appointed them.
Oh, well, of course, so to speak, but by president, we refer to the people running the country in lieu of the person we refer to as president. That would be another debate, and we'll be coming to that. It's as bad as it is. But then I must say that in a system where the president very tactfully steps in and appoints generals and gives them instructions, and then these appointments also come with huge cash flows. And then, you know, okay, you are going there, you have a mission. And then he does it tactfully. What happens in a state, in a bizarre mafia state like the one we are in, is that he picks you, he knows he's got debt on you, he knows he's got compromise on you, and then he sends you with a mission and say, you know what, go ahead this institution. He knows that you will be subservient to him. But then, are we not even beginning to see clear signs that even the army is beginning to understand? We've heard unconfirmed rumors that one of the reasons they keep postponing this declaration of results is because within the ranks of the army, there is dissent. There are splinter groups. They have not come to terms with how they should handle this. They have not come to terms with a unified modus operandi. It's proof that even the army is tired. There is a limit to what everybody can take. They've not been able to arrest TCHIROMA all up until now. We saw the heavy artillery that was deployed in Garwa. Very quickly, we heard they were called back to Yaoundé. And then they've not been able to continue with the crackdown they started at the beginning of this crisis. That tells you that somehow the army, and even the statement the army spokesperson came up with, I think that was more or less some kind of first in the history of our nation, where they come out and they tell you, oh, please, we are neutral, we are apolitical, we are there to defend the country and not to take any political stance. I bet you that things may be slow, but things are changing. I want to believe that things will never be the same again. Now, unfortunately, the stone in the shoe, the fly in the ointment is that we've allowed this to drag for so long, and then people have not decided not to bat an eyelid, but now they are rising. How one quick parameter that explains this is the fact that even in military camps, I bet you, in military barracks, do you know that Chiroma won? It's an open secret.
In the Northwest, the information that I have is
Yes.
effectively he did win
Yeah.
in military barracks there.
In the Southwest as well. I heard, unconfirmed, that in the military headquarters in Yaoundé, in Quartier General, that they didn't know how they would present this result, because to them, it's an embarrassment that the opposition would win. You see, when it's wired in our DNA that a political party should not win in a particular polling station because there are state officials there are military there, and who said the military or the security forces must be loyal to the ruling party? So the fact that they are expressing this and we are seeing these telltale signs should mean that somehow there is a grumbling in the house, and sooner or later we would see the effects coming out. This neutrality would not last. This apparent neutrality would not last forever.
We're going to continue the conversation, but first, information I am just gathering. In the South region, currently in KOC, the stores of merchants who are not from the South are being burnt down by people who are from there, and they're asking them to leave. This is a part of the regime's playbook, but also I wanted to read a statement that Mr. Chiroma has just published, and it's in French. He says, voilà la panique qui vous pousse à commettre des fautes graves. Vous avez un désavantage, je vous connais très bien. Je connais vos manœuvres, vos tactiques, je les anticipe. Et c'est ainsi que vous tomberez. Changez au moins votre playbook car vous êtes trop prévisible. Voici en clair la stratégie que vous utilisez depuis toujours pour rester au pouvoir. Réduire au maximum le nombre de jeunes inscrits sur les listes électorales afin de maîtriser la majorité de l'électorat. Réduire le nombre d'électeurs jeunes, c'est traduire un vote sanction populaire. Ne pas distribuer les cartes d'électeurs aux nouveaux inscrits. Sans carte, on ignore son bureau de vote et on ne peut pas voter. L'abstention devient alors un allié pour vous. Publier la liste électorale tardivement pour empêcher ceux qui votent avec des reçus ou des pièces d'identité d'apprendre à temps où voter. Quand ils découvrent que leur bureau de vote est à des kilomètres, beaucoup renoncent. Dissimuler des bureaux de vote dans des domiciles privés ou dans des zones enclavées et dangereuses, notamment au sud-ouest et au nord-ouest, pour décourager la participation et faciliter la manipulation. Manipuler les procès-verbaux, les PV sont conçus de façon à rendre possible l'arrachage ou la substitution des pages sans signature visible. Sur toutes les feuilles, les signatures figurent parfois seulement en première et en dernière page, laissant des marges de manœuvre au pouvoir si les autres étapes échouent. Profiter du délai de 15 jours, the 15 days we just spoke about, avant la proclamation finale pour modifier les PV transmis par des agents inféodés, puis présenter les documents officiels, entre guillemets, conformes aux intérêts du pouvoir, enfin brandir la légalité procédurale, le rôle du Conseil constitutionnel pour faire accepter au pays un résultat construit par la fraude. Militariser le pays pour instaurer la peur et dissuader toute mobilisation citoyenne. Si le peuple insiste, la machine passe à la répression et aux arrestations de masse, une intimidation calculée qui ne peut durer indéfiniment car les prisons ne pourront pas contenir tout un peuple. And the list goes on. And we see here that this is a man, of course, he came from the system, but before that, he was an opposition leader who spent 6 years in jail. And he tells of the horrible conditions that he experienced, but he seems to have mastered the system and is doing little things that in the past were not done. He seems to have studied not only the regime, but the opposition leaders that came before.
No, what he's saying is what we have been discussing in terms of the regime's playbook. Now, the question becomes, we all know what is going to happen. He said he anticipated that they were going to do it. That's what they were going to do. All of us knew that's their playbook. They were going to run it. The question is this: what will the people, what does he intend to do about it? The two options, they're just basically two options. Or I don't want to extrapolate, because the peace option and the violent option is binary, because the peace option can go to ghost towns, civil disobedience, international pressure from the diaspora. The other option is people power. Burkina Faso, Madagascar, the Gambia, right? The people say we have had enough, and they rise up. Look, one of my professors in grad school used to tell us, he said, God loves the poor. And we're like, he said, yes, else he would not have created so many of them. So that's why when the people rise up, they do so knowing that God is on their side. As Václav Havel said, no army can withstand an idea whose time has come. The idea of a free Cameroon where people can still dream that they have a country, the time is now. For the 3 years, and we see the stagnation, the paralysis, the corruption. Look at the system. Abusive patronage and ethnic-inspired clientelism. That the people in the South are burning the stores of non-indigenous people. It's not the first time it's happened. It happens during every election, and every time the Kang Beti Bulu, they feel that their hold on power is threatened. In the 90s, when we were in the universities, when we launched multipartism, they said Anglo-Bamir and Trechevu. Now the same Anglophones, they want to declare their independence. They are fighting to hold the Nous sommes les frères. With Cameroon is one, united and indivisible. But those were the same people. Emma Basile called us les ennemis dans la maison, the enemies in the house. Nous sommes les bien frères. So, look, the one thing the British people never thought and never wanted to happen is to make this fight a northern Anawusa Beti fight. They thought after pushing Kanto, they didn't know that that is the unintended consequences of pushing out Maurice Kamto. And then the population decided that they looked at all the candidates and saw Chiroma had the political sagacity, the gumption, the energy, and the drive to rally behind. He didn't say anything spectacular. The other candidates were just tired and spent forces. Bello, Akere, Joshua C., the SDF his candidacy never had traction. He had a false sense of entitlement that when they talked about a single position candidate, it should be him. Fundi had that same argument because he could pull the crowds. At the time in the 90s, that guy man told him, see, the petit leader à la tête de grand parti. So when we talk about some of these things, we are eyewitnesses to history. The question is, what do they come? Because every people deserve the kind of leadership they get. We are not talking about Biya who has his mental faculties intact. We are talking about the effigy of a 93-year-old man who ran for president, and people are arguing that he won. That's how bad it is. It's a picture.
I want to add, so that I don't forget, Ekine.
You want to chime in on Mr. Ekine's fiery responses. You want to chime in, but I am interested in getting your response on the Hausa or Northern versus Beti issue, because the regime has always, played with hate, with tribalism, with boxing opposition leaders or dissidents into a tight little corner to discredit opposition leaders anytime it has an adversary. In the 90s, of course, Frundi, Anglo-Bami, and then after that, the hate for the Bamileke man with the rise to popularity or political stardom of Maurice Kamto. And then now you have a guy from the north who the regime has used that part of the country to claim that it wins, and that is the reason behind its Sovietic scores in elections. How does one explain his popularity today, and in what way does his own popularity and his own rise differ from all the other opposition leaders? What level of threats do we see here?
Do you know that two things worked in Chiroma's favor? The fact that the people at large were disappointed that they were looking up to Maurice Kamto, they had pinned their hopes on Maurice Kamto, and then Maurice Kamto at the last minute was sidelined. Now the people stayed waiting for Maurice Kamto to give them the go-ahead on which of the candidates to back in the coming elections. That did not happen. So the people stayed under the suspense, looking from what angle the hope would come from, looking from which sky salvation would eventually come. And then Chiroma came up, the thirst of the people. And then I must say this, Chiroma's charisma, Chiroma's humility. In his campaign, he did say that, oh, I know you might have something against me, some things I might have voiced out in my time in government. Please forgive me. And he lashes out at the same government he had backed for over 20 years. And he said, this government is crumbling, this government is aging, this government has failed to deliver. I was there, I know the system from within. Please forgive me. These things worked in Chiroma's favor. And then with Chiroma, we could clearly see the contrast between somebody who was out on the field campaigning, trying to woo the electorate, trying to win the hearts of the people, trying to charm them. And then we saw on the other hand, on the other side of the political divide, someone who went out for just one political meeting, which of course was a fiasco, with the president of the National Assembly doing what he did. I said it before, I'll say it again. A senile dog's death begins by making it deaf. Now, this is the magic that Chiroma puts on, his charisma. And all of a sudden, we saw people gathering around that man, wanting to listen to him. People just started loving him without even knowing why they were loving him. They just needed a change. He happened to be the candidate that people disliked less, if I would put it that way.
The lesser evil.
Yeah, he was the lesser
devil.
Evil.
I called him the Judas of Yaoundé.
But Ekene, and I want to circle back on to this with you, listening to Levy. Don't you think there are other reasons that also contributed to his rise? Of course, the elimination of Kamto from the race in such a grotesque way in front of the Constitutional Council, and then his franc-parler, his ability to apologize and to connect with people, his charisma, the baritone voice that carries and is commanding. But also, Ekene, tell me, don't you think the Anglophone crisis and the way it has played out contributed? Usually time is an ally to Paul Biya and an enemy to his adversaries. But in this case, with the Anglophone crisis, 7 years ago, for instance, when Kamto was running for president, Anglophones had spat out the electoral process and really believed, a majority of them, in this thing called independence, or a higher level of decentralization and they believed at least in federalism. 7 years after the killing on both ends, people are tired and just looking for a semblance of a solution, and at this time vomiting Mr. Biya. Didn't this play a significant role in his rise to stardom?
I think the facts of circumstances and history conspired or came somehow aligned at a particular time that made the rise of Chiroma inevitable. By the way, in put in proper context, in 1992, during the March legislative elections, Chiroma was the power behind the UNDP victory, even though Bello was chairman after they took the party from Samuel Eboa. They were all elected to parliament. They ran for parliament with Bello, all of them. They had 68 parliamentary seats. They even had 88 until Ebongole, then governor of the Northwest region, rigged the elections, seized the elections from the Ngobe Singsu Romanos and the UNDP, and gave it to his CPC Bali classmate, Achidachu. And then he eventually became prime minister. Now, to understand the rise of Chiroma, especially within the context of the North, and you put it within the historical perspective of Ahijo giving power to Biya, I would like to take you back to something that happened in 2002, which very few people remember. And that is part of the underlying dynamics that even some other people are saying, look, this is why the Betty people are so adamantly holding on to power. But to cut a long story short, Chiroma and the others were dropped from government. They wrote a white paper. the first time they were dropped from government, that Biya has abandoned the septentrion, the three northern regions. And they pointed to the crumbling infrastructure, the roads, the schools, the hospitals, everything was in decay. At the time, the northerners in the CPDM, the northern CPDM elite, led by Maraf Hamidu Yaya, Amadou Ali, Ayang Luke, Amajoda, a couple of all of them, they took journalists. They carried them to all the subdivisional capitals of all the three northern provinces to say the problems that they have enumerated in the white paper, they are not unique only to the three northern provinces, the three northern regions at the time. Now, all that meeting with journalists culminated in a grand rally in Marwa, where the so-called Marwa Declaration of 2002 was signed or was made. And the central nexus of that Marwa Declaration of 2002 was that the Grand North would accompany Paul Biya until the end of his political career, after which he will hand over power to them as their son gave him power. That's a gentleman's agreement. That declaration was read by Sali Dairu. I was there. I was working for Cameroon Tribune at the time. So it was not like some other person knew. Now, the fracture came in is, after 2018, the Northerners, and you see Abubakar Osman May has been saying it all the time in most of his interviews, some Northern elite, that le non est prêt à reconquérir, à reprendre le pouvoir. Now, the question is, in 2025, the Northerners, Bello, Chiroma, who had accompanied the president as part of the Grand Northern Alliance, including the ones in the CPDM, they have come to the conclusion that Biya has come to the end of his mandate. And as per the terms of the 2002 Marwa Declaration, power has to go back to the North. Now, the people around the president, Ngongo, Vondayolo, and the ideological father, Famendongo, who is a tribal jingoist of the most corrosive and extreme order, because he's the brain behind all this, and then they are attack dog, Atanganji, maybe on some instructions with the first lady. They are saying now, no, Biya is still in charge. That is a problem between the Abuzas and the Beti people. They have agreed that they will hand over power back to them when Biya's mandate ends. Now, Chiroma and the other, that's why Chiroma started and said, no, President is invisible. That Biya is invisible. He's not the one ruling. People just come and tell you on very high instructions from the head of state. Nobody knows whether those instructions are true. There's no way you can verify them. Biya himself now is insulated. So the Northerners are arguing. Because you remember they sent Ngongo up there to go and talk to them. They said they wanted to receive him. He said he doesn't have time. And the people revolted that before these elections were coming. He paid a trip up there. Ngongo paid a trip up there to go and try to convince them that, look, the big man is still in charge. They said, no, let the big man himself come and talk to us. Don't come there and talk to us. So they know that Biya's mandate has ended, but some other underlying dynamics like the fallout from April 6th, when Northerners were massacred, the people have always been talking about revenge or accountability for April 6, 1984. So the Betis or the Bulus are very scared that giving back power to the North, there will be some reckoning. So those are the dynamics that you see are playing out now in these elections, because the ordinary Beti man suffers as a Cameroonian, very few of them. They are poorer than most Cameroonians. I've gone to the south. I left Zoitele to Nkinzok, Belinga Butu's village. It took us 5 hours. We ended up doing the last trip of food. That's a distance of 12 kilometers from the divisional headquarters, Zoitele to Nkinzok. 12 kilometers, it took us 5 hours. So don't think that the people in the south, they just want power for power's sake.
We're going to get to that, but before, the massive arrests continue, and I'm going to read a few. 3 other politicians have been arrested as we speak. Aliu Ben Ibrahima, who is a militant of the AFP of the late Ben Muda, was arrested in his home by military men in Gaundere about an hour ago. We also have Abdul Musine, who is a divisional delegate for professional training, of which ISSA was minister at some time for the Benue, and happens to be the regional leader for the FSNC of ISSA in the north, was also abducted from his home because, I mean, by the military. He didn't have an arrest warrant, and his wife was pregnant, was beaten. But I also want to say that Parfait Voum, who you might all know, who was the regional chairman of the divisional chairman of the SDF, somewhere in the center until 3 years ago when he left that party and created his Mouvement Républicain, a staunch supporter of Issa Chiroma, accompanying him throughout the campaign trail, has also just been arrested. He was my guest here last week and exposed some of the things that were happening at the National Vote Counting Commission sessions. Does this really help to calm a situation that is already really tense, Levi?
Not at all. Not at all. This is putting salt in an open wound. This is pouring oil on the fire. And one of the things that beat my imagination, I was still saying it the other day to someone, was that if we lived in Russia or in China, in maybe Venezuela or in some totalitarian regime, we would find a way to accommodate this, or in North Korea. But this is North Korea happening to us. This is North Korea. This is Pyongyang on our doorsteps. It is unacceptable. It's inconceivable. But then it only goes a long way to confirm that we are in a repressive state. And then you find a minister of interior come and say that Cameroon is a state where we respect the rule of law. But this is no rule of law. These are political arrests. These are political crackdowns. These are gestures and measures that are unacceptable. For how long will this happen? I bet you that no lie can live forever. Just no lie. They would rant, they would rage, but at the end of the day, it has missed. You see that they are beginning to want to accept it gradually, like, okay, we see the Jean de Dieu, the likes of Jean de Dieu Momo, who knew that with the tablets of soap and the loincloth that he gave in Chang, they would vote for the CPDM, and then he was turned, and then they can't accept. So they are now resorting to this kind of violence, this kind of restraint. They are shrinking the political space because you dare not rise up to speak against something that is crystal clear. But then I bet you that it only goes a long way to compound an already very sensitive situation. I wanted to also chime in and add something to what Ekine was saying about the Northern Alliance. You see, in the collective mindset of the Northerner, in the Northerner's mindset, he knows that there was a time in history when power went from north to south, and the South has clung to power for these 4+ decades. And then over this time, what has happened to the North? Come to think of it, I was listening to, I think, the governor of Adamawa talking to some people they had gathered, and someone rose up and told the governor, please, Mr. Governor, don't send us elites who come here every time there's an election and they talk to us and they try to woo us because they've taken money from campaigns and nothing is changing on the ground. Even the prelates,
the Lamido of Marwa.
Yes, he was saying that, please, we don't want this. So in the collective mindset of the Northerner, they know that the Northerner gave power to a Southerner, the which Southerner was supposed to rule for the benefit of the entire nation. I bet you if you go to the North, you would weep for that part. There are parts that are still enclaved. There are subdivisions with no classrooms, with children going to school and sitting under trees. And the Northerners are underdeveloped. They don't benefit from what we refer to as the national cake. Yet there are elites from there who run there anytime there is an election, and they try to woo them. And they refer to the far north as the president's first daughter, who is supposed to be cherished. And the president has gone there 7 years later to echo the same. So they are tired. So everybody is chanting, power should come back to us. Let's see what use we can. And then Chiroma's program too, his political agenda is his manifesto is quite enticing. But I want to say this, these continuing arrests are all signs of frustration that they don't control the situation. And everybody's asking them, you say that everyone voted massively for you, but why the fear? Why do you clamp down on people who love you? Why do you do that? So I
Speaking
just want to say they are pouring oil in the fire.
And speaking of the northern regions, they carry a deep wound. The first president, of course, was Amadou Ahidjo, who left power on his own accord, but was framed to have fomented a coup because people close to him till this date say he was not the one who was behind this. But also, we remember the massive arrests after that in the 80s. And the same way in the Briketeri neighborhood in Yaoundé yesterday, the police cracked down on people based off of the clothes they wore and the way their features and the way they looked. We saw this in the 80s as well after the aborted coup. But also, their most cherished elite are today languishing behind bars. I speak of Marafa Hamidou Yaya, who was sent to prison for some of the most, laughable reasons. They spoke of intellectual community complicity to plot embezzlement. And do you see? And then you see in the north today in Garwa, in front of TCHIROMA's home, the human shield that Ekine and you discussed in the beginning, protecting the man who they believe with unquestionable doubt has won this election. Do you think that some of these wounds are deep enough for them to hold their ground in longevity, as TCHIROMA said last week when he was calling on Cameroonians to march and stand firm until they get what they are asking for, which is that the ballot results be truly reflected?
Here's a part. This wave of arrest is typical of desperation. It speaks directly to the desperation of the regime. And it is a mark of intimidation. They want to instill fear in the populace. They don't want them to come out and reclaim their voice. But as I said before, God loves the poor. That's why He created so many of them. And that's why when the poor rise up in protest, they do so knowing that God is on their side. That's why they say Vox Populi, Vox Dei. They are leaving the people no other option than to come out and demonstrate that power does not belong to A to D or high instructions. Power belongs to the people. You cannot, honestly speaking, change the entrenched system with Biya at the head. Only Biya can do it. But the man has lost his mental faculties and no longer thinks. So they're just keeping him there as a symbol and then trying to run the country by proxy. Unelected, a cabal of power, political jobbers, and power brokers are the ones running the country. For the few hours that Biya is awake at 93 years old, after 43 years in power, you really think he even thinks he remembers that he's president? Or does he even care? We are Africans, we respect age. But right now, what is happening to Biya is an abuse of an old man. That's parental abuse. The fact that some people are insisting that he can be president at the age of 93, I ask them a simple question. The CPDM had the choice. Give us a candidate maybe in his 60s or even 70s, and you will still win because you control the electoral machinery and the whole process. That is one of the main differences between Chiroma now and the previous Utkanto in 2018 and Frundi in 92. We are talking about, I asked them a question, my CPDM friends. If you want to leave Yaoundé to Douala, you go to Guarantee Express. And they tell you that that bus that you have taken, the driver is 93 years old. Is 93 years old. Will you enter that bus? If you go to the hospital, they want to operate you maybe for appendicitis or some other procedure. And they tell you the doctor who is going to conduct the operation is 93 years old. Will you accept? If you take your child to go and put in a school, they tell you that the teacher will be teaching your son who is 6 years old. The teacher is 93 years old. Will you accept? If you want to even enter a plane, they tell you that the pilot is 93 years old. Would you get that plane? What makes you think that 93 years old can run a country with all the challenges in the 21st century?
If you're joining us live, this is Angie Forbin, and joining us to discuss the current stakes and the post-electoral crisis and erupting violence in the country. We have Ekine Agboebai as well as Levi Mbushu. Tens of people, hundreds of people have been arrested, but also tens of political officials who are allies to ISSA Chiroma, who has declared himself a winner, but also asked for Cameroonians to come out across the country.
He just didn't declare himself a winner. He won the elections. The facts are there to prove
it. Yes. Let's say that. But he has also asked Cameroonians to come out and protest tomorrow as from 3 p.m. We've already seen the colors of what could happen. People have been in the streets since last week. People have been protesting in different regions of the country, the northern regions, as well as the west, the littoral, and in some places of the southwest in Limbe, as we saw last week. We've also had a territorial administration minister who has been very stern and come out multiple times to threaten, but also just a few moments ago, he had another press briefing where he accuses the opposition or claims that people with improvised explosive devices were arrested in the north, and some were caught with automatic weapons. We've seen the regime systematically frame its opposition leaders every time there is dissidence, to frame its opposition leaders and take them to the military court for trials. I'm going to play this quick excerpt, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to seek your comments on what is happening across the country. So this is
les responsables de médias. En ma qualité d'agent du gouvernement dans le processus électoral, je vous ai convié une fois de plus ce samedi 25 octobre 2025 pour vous entretenir sur certains faits de nature à porter gravement atteinte à la sécurité de notre pays au moment où l'on s'achemine vers la proclamation des résultats de l'élection du président de la République du 12 octobre 2025. En effet, dans la nuit du 22 octobre 2025, 3 terroristes venant d'un pays voisin ont été appréhendés alors qu'ils essayaient d'introduire dans la ville de Garoua une grande quantité d'explosifs, manifestement pour commettre des attentats terroristes dans le contexte de tensions post-électorales entretenues par certains leaders politiques irresponsables. Le mode opératoire projeté est d'infiltrer des groupes de manifestants et de commettre des attentats terroristes entraînant des pertes en vies humaines qui seraient imputées aux forces de maintien de l'ordre. Mardi dernier, à Yaoundé, lors d'une manifestation de rue organisée par un groupuscule d'individus drogués qui réclamaient la soi-disant victoire du président autoproclamé, l'un de ses représentants a été interpellé parmi les manifestants avec un pistolet automatique, des munitions et une forte somme d'argent. Cet individu de moralité douteuse aurait pu tirer sur la foule pour que cet acte odieux soit imputé à nos vaillantes forces de sécurité. Ce stratagème s'est récemment vérifié lors d'une manifestation illégale organisée à Garoua le 21 octobre dernier par les sympathisants du candidat autoproclamé président de la République, en marge de laquelle le décès tragique de Madame Zouhaïra Hassana, enseignante à l'école primaire arabe de Bumboumré, a été malicieusement attribué aux forces de l'ordre par un média acquis au mouvement insurrectionnel, alors même que le père de la regrettée a clairement indiqué qu'elle avait été lâchement assassinée par un homme en civil. Une enquête criminelle a d'ores et déjà été ouverte par les services compétents pour faire toute la lumière sur cette affaire et établir les responsabilités des différentes personnes impliquées. Il vous souvient que j'avais annoncé lors de mes précédents points de presse l'existence d'un vaste projet insurrectionnel ourdi par certains hommes politiques conscients de leur incapacité à accéder au pouvoir par la voie démocratique. La stratégie à l'œuvre consistait à publier à travers les réseaux sociaux au soir du 12 octobre 2025 des résultats frauduleux favorables à un candidat d'opposition. Celui-ci devait, dans la foulée, s'autoproclamer vainqueur de l'élection et appeler ses partisans à descendre dans la rue pour défendre sa prétendue victoire. Les récents événements survenus dans notre pays ont clairement démontré que nous avions raison. À l'aube du 14 octobre 2025, un candidat à la récente élection présidentielle, après avoir inondé les réseaux sociaux des faux résultats ou des résultats incomplets, s'est effectivement déclaré vainqueur de ce scrutin. À son instigation, ses partisans ont organisé de violentes manifestations dans plusieurs localités dans notre pays, qui se sont traduites dans certaines villes, à l'instar de Tchang, par la destruction des édifices publics. Mais grâce au professionnalisme de nos forces de sécurité et sur l'encadrement des autorités administratives.
Oh, we are back. If you're joining us, Angie Forbin Live it is. I am Angie. Ekine Agboaba is here with us, as well as Levi Bushu. We are speaking about the current post-electoral crisis in Cameroon. Ekine, you heard the minister again, as usual, in a style that is known to be his, accusing politicians of plans of insurrection, fake results, demonizing them. But this is a minister who was the central nerve of a plan and that was executed and successfully to oust the main opposition candidate for the last presidential election, a man who officially came second but claimed victory as well. The Minat website was cooked, and in 24 hours, the name of the national president of the party that he had chosen to run with was changed, creating a dangerous precedent, and we know the results. But before that, over the past 3 years, he had come out and made veiled threats, stating clearly that he was not going to allow Mr. Kamto to run in the last presidential election. Prior to that, in 2018, the year of the presidential election where Mr. Kamto was the main adversary to the Biya regime, he had said in private circles that he was going to arrest Mr. Kamto and nothing was going to happen. Guess what happened in 2019, early 2019? Well, Mr. Kamto was thrown behind bars for countless months. What is the weight of his words, if I can put it that way?
You see, what we just witnessed with Paula Tanganji, the only one word I can use to describe it is pathetic. Pathetic because when you put a man in an office far above his intellectual capacity, that's what you get. Somebody who is a cabinet minister should have that refined discourse and that sense of sagacity and humility and that value system that defines public service, to know that you are talking to the country, a country that's on edge. You see, there's a problem with the regime, with the system. they tell them, they fabricate their own lies and they believe their lies. So it becomes even, you pity them instead of getting angry, because it borders on self-delusion. Those Atanganji really believe that sitting there and saying that three terrorists from a neighboring country, it's always playing the victim. They were arrested with explosives and all, and then he's now trying to say the young teacher who was killed when security forces opened fire was killed by somebody, a plainclothes civilian. Does he believe himself that anybody outside a mental asylum takes them seriously or can even believe in them? His head should be examined. When you look at that kind of performance, nobody takes him seriously. He has no credibility, even at a personal level. Who believes Atanganji or believes the government or anything that comes out of his mouth? His bellicosity, all that is just amounts to stupidity. He's somebody who is very uncouth, unrefined. He lacks the intellectual capacity to understand what is at stake here. He doesn't know what he's doing. And he will sleepwalk the authorities into a major crisis if they don't call him to order. Because that is how he was speaking with the Anglophone crisis. Si tante de prendre exemple, le biva regresar en 2 semaines. 9 years after, here we are. There's no Anglophone problem. I mean, look at the stupidity, the effrontery, and look at how he even speaks. Where are all those childish lies?
Mr. Bushu, you lived through elections since the 90s, and you've seen different ministers of the interior, Kungu Edima, for example, Marafa, and even the man who is the current government spokesperson, Mr. Rene Sadi. Do you think that, in what way do you see a difference with the style of these administrative officials prior to the current Minister of the Interior? And I'll add that, do you think that he was intentionally chosen to do just what he is doing now for specific reasons?
Let me take a minute to address that issue before you come in.
Yes, Ekine, go ahead.
Friend told me, he said, look, the choice of Atanganji was a deliberate, intended by Francophones to discredit the Anglophones who have been complaining that they are not being assigned key strategic ministers. He said, of all the renowned civil administrators that Anglophones have in Cameroon, the only person Biya could think of to make him territorial administration minister is Atanganji. He said it was a deliberate choice. They did it on purpose. And that is what we get. And then what are they saying? L'Anglophone, he calls himself all kinds of stupid names, Moulinex, Sheriff. Where has he heard that? And Zechungi didn't do that. Wedima didn't do it. But he's a reflection of Anglophones. So they did it on purpose.
So I want to say that this particular minister, people say he's uncultured. They're not mistaken. He's uncouth. I don't want to say that he's unschooled. I don't want to say that. But he stands in a class of his own. And people, political pundits, political analysts have come out to say that he was picked there as a very strategic move by the regime to not only throw dirt on the Anglophones themselves, but to actually counter any political emergence of a political force from amongst the Anglophones. I bet you, still rumor, unverified, or unconfirmed, it was said that he was brought in because at the beginning of the crisis, top officials amongst the highest ranking government Anglophone official at the time had openly criticized him during crisis meetings. And the criticisms were so bitter that there was beginning to appear a very palpable discontent between him and other Anglophone elites. And now, because he was not in the very good books of the Anglophone elites, then the regime, knowing that that was the case, they decided to make him Minister of Interior. And then we see his arrogance, we see his style, we see his uncooked, uncultured, administrative style that doesn't even smell of modern statesmanship. His style, his language, his body language is very menacing, to say the least, and it doesn't speak of the candor, of the ambience that a statesman, his rank, should have. But then we just say that, okay, maybe the big man there picked him to do the dirty job for him. And after that, what would happen? People say he's dispensable. He'll be used, misused, abused, and discarded at the end of the day.
But do you think that, because I mean, he's kept his job for all these years, do you think that with this, the regime actually intends to cool off the climate that is so hostile?
No, not at all. Sorry, Ekiden, not at all. Because what does the regime do that makes sense to you, Angie, Ekine? Nothing. The more you try to understand the regime, the more you end up taking 2 tablets of paracetamol to cool down the headache that comes from it. Because you can't understand how there is a finger pointing from the National Anti-Corruption Commission, pointing clear fingers at him with facts on the table that this man has dirtied his hands in a corruption scandal alongside other ministers, and nothing is done. Gosh, nothing is done. Acts and indictments of corruption and malpractice, financial malfeasance, written all over him, and nothing is done. He's given a promotion, and he says what he can say. He even goes on air on France 24 and contradicts the prime minister, who is his boss. And what is done? Nothing. Just nothing.
That's why somebody told me, say, look, if somebody explains Cameroon to you and you say you understand it,
and you understand, then
the man didn't explain it well.
Didn't come through well.
Yeah, it didn't explain it well. Because how did we get here? When I say Cameroon is a kakistocracy, and it's defined as a government by the worst of its citizens. I mean, this is a race to the bottom. But again, you see, everything that has a beginning has an end. Nothing lasts forever. Revolutions never announce themselves. Change doesn't come with a high instructions or presidential decrees. When the tide of change sweep them off their feet, that's when we'll know where he'll be standing. Because in 1992, Achirachu was used to play the same game. They called him to make a speech asking the Americans to back off Cameroon. And he went on air as Prime Minister to make the speech and was attacking the Americans because Madam Cook was obviously pro-Frundi because everybody knew that Frundi had won.
Ambassador Francis Cook, who had as her deputy Tibor Nagy.
Yeah, so at that time they sent Achirachu. Now they are sending him to come up with these fabricated stories of people importing ammunition and explosives from a neighboring country. Does it sound familiar? When they launched the SDF, they sang a foreign national anthem, the Nigerian national anthem. I was in the university then. So who really sits and believes all these lies? They lie to themselves, they believe their lies, and the regime has no credibility, let alone a Tanganji.
We're coming back to that right now. And if you're joining us, Angie Forbin Live it is. Ekine Agboibai is our guest, as well as Levin Bushu. But joining us, the third guest whom we've been waiting for, an economist, a stalwart of the SDF in the 90s, who eventually transitioned into the AFP of the late Ben Muna and decided to completely retire from politics. Chrétien Tabeting is here, and I'm going to go ahead and add him. And, it's such a pleasure to have you people and to discuss the context between and the similarities between the 90s and 2025. Mr. Tabeting, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Or this afternoon.
Bonsoir. Oui, bonsoir. Bonsoir à tout le monde. Et je suis vraiment désolé de vous avoir rejoint si tard parce que j'ai été pris par un certain nombre de réunions. Vous vous en doutez bien, l'heure est très grave au Cameroun. L'heure est très grave, c'est un euphémisme que de le dire. Par ailleurs, je vais m'excuser parce que je vais m'exprimer en français. Dans la mesure où j'espère que cela ne vous posera pas de problème.
Non, absolument pas. C'est une conversation informelle et le but est de sensibiliser au maximum, mais de revenir sur les faits et les similarités ou les similitudes entre les années 90, 80, 90 jusqu'en 2025, parce que Par exemple, il y a quelques instants, le ministre de l'Intérieur a fait une sortie pour accuser ou annoncer qu'ils avaient mis sous la main ou interpellé des individus en possession de devises improvisées explosives. Mais en 92, une coïncidence assez intéressante, on a également accusé le SDF d'avoir prononcé un hymne nigérian. Vous ne voyez pas une étrange ou intéressante entre ce qui se passe actuellement avec les arrestations, avec la démonisation des opposants et ce qui s'est passé en 90, vous qui avez vécu et qui avez été un membre influent du SDF?
En effet, vous avez absolument raison. Nous ne sommes pas nombreux à pouvoir effectivement le dire. Je le dis pour le regretter, mais il se trouve qu'il y a beaucoup de similitudes. Je me souviens à l'époque, lorsqu'il y a eu déclaration d'état d'urgence, je me trouvais à Bamenda. Nous étions chez Sherman John Fundi, nous étions en conclave. Et tout le monde a été arrêté. Et à la demande du ministre André Tsungi à l'époque, on a laissé Niben, enfin, le procureur Mouna, le bâtonnier Mouna, et moi-même, qui étions les seuls deux responsables du SDF qu'on a laissés en liberté, mais confinés dans la ville de Bamenda. Et après avoir eu quelques petites informations que nous avons compris quelle était leur stratégie. Donc, leur stratégie, c'était de faire de nous les liens entre l'intérieur, chez John Fondi, à Tarakon, et l'extérieur. Donc, nous l'avons compris un peu tard, mais c'est un peu ce que nous avons fait. Mais qu'à cela ne tienne, pour revenir à ce que vous disiez, effectivement, il y a beaucoup de similitudes. Et on accuse les opposants de beaucoup de choses. Ils vont fabriquer, comme cela fut le cas en 1992, un certain nombre de preuves pour pouvoir justifier des inepties, excusez-moi le terme, mais à la différence de 1992, en 2025, le peuple camerounais, dans son immense majorité, pour ne pas dire vraiment dans sa quasi-totalité, ne croit pas à toutes ces balivernes. Donc, ils vont fabriquer beaucoup de choses, ils vont dire beaucoup de choses. Quelques jours bien avant que ce qui s'est passé hier, j'étais en ligne avec d'ailleurs ISSA et Canet, donc avec qui je m'entretiens. Je m'entretiens tous les jours. On s'appelait pratiquement tous les jours, puisqu'il est à Douala. Moi, ils étaient devant la permanence, qu'il n'y avait aucun problème. Et d'ailleurs même, ils discutaient avec eux régulièrement. Ils leur disaient non, ne vous camouflez pas. D'après ce qu'il m'en a dit, il n'y a même pas une semaine, hein, il y a même quelques jours. Il te dit, pourquoi parler de crise? Et en début de semaine, il me disait, mais ils sont tous là, ils rôdent là. Nous, c'est ce que. Donc, je disais qu'il y a beaucoup de similitudes, mais cette fois-ci, je pense que les choses, le peuple camerounais ne va pas se laisser faire. Voilà, c'est tout ce que je peux vous dire.
Pensez-vous que le fait de la digitalisation du monde avec l'arrivée des réseaux sociaux contribue largement à cette percée de ISSA, mais également à la réaction de la population dans les différentes régions du pays suite à ces fraudes massives que nous avons vues et suite à la déclaration de victoire de TCHIROMA?
Non, je le confirme avec beaucoup de force, dans la mesure où moi-même, en tant qu'informaticien de formation, j'y ai beaucoup participé à mon niveau, et où nous avons effectivement travaillé très sérieusement sur la base des éléments que nous avions. Bien avant que l'avènement de TCHIROMA, j'ai travaillé dans l'équipe informelle du MRC de Maurice Kamto, dans la structuration effectivement je dirais de l'opérationnalité du contrôle de vote. parce que j'ai eu la chance en 1992 d'avoir été un peu le pivot du contrôle de vote pour le compte de notre candidat, qui était le candidat de l'Union pour le changement. Donc, je peux confirmer que, effectivement, l'avènement de la digitalisation et des réseaux sociaux a facilité énormément les choses. Et puis, ben, écoutez, que dire, c'est pas quelque chose de spécifique au Cameroun. Vous l'avez vu au Sénégal. La Cour constitutionnelle n'a pas eu d'autre choix au Sénégal que de prononcer la victoire de Dioma et de Sonko. Donc, il n'y avait même pas le choix. Et c'est exactement le problème que nous avons au Cameroun, parce qu'il n'y a pas photo, il n'y a pas photo. On n'a même pas besoin de discuter. Nous avions, dans le cadre de l'état-major du président TCHIROMA, nous avions fait une étude très, très simple, compte tenu du fait que les 31 500 bureaux de vote ne pouvaient être couverts en si peu de temps. Nous avions travaillé, et je pense que ça a été porté à la connaissance du public et du monde. Nous avons travaillé sur la base des statistiques, c'est-à-dire nous avons cherché pratiquement le nombre de départements qui représentaient plus de 80% des électeurs. Et nous avons travaillé dessus, voilà, nous avons travaillé dessus, et il s'est avéré que, au-delà des électeurs qui étaient inscrits, nous avons essayé d'optimiser ce calcul avec les votants, le nombre de votants, sur la base des procès-verbaux qui nous sont remontés. Ben, je pense que la victoire était complètement évidente. Et je pense que le verdict a été très, très clair et cinglant. Voilà. C'est ce que je peux vous dire.
Ekine, a quick question. During the week, there was a conversation sparked about the addition of the numbers with regards to the results that were being published, many of whom were pro-Biya activists, but also probably hadn't taken the time to go into the Google Drive link and review the result slips or the vote tally sheets that he had taken the time to publish. Why is there such a confusion around those sheets or the statements that he makes about his victory claims and the numbers that he's advancing? In fact, the Minister Delegate of Justice, Mr. Momo, had come out to say that his numbers were incoherent. Do you have a comment to make about that? Could you offer some explanations as to why?
Just as Mr. Tavesin said, statistically, Biya cannot win the elections. Mathematically, he cannot get to 50%.
Exactly.
This is not probability. I did a simple Bayesian regression analysis to explain using the numbers that Elecam gave in 2018 and 2025. And you just put in the numbers in the formula. You do a simple regression analysis. Numbers don't lie. This is an issue of mathematics. It's not political. Yeah. If you look at the 18 divisions that have over 80% of the electorate, Biya, they'll come and tell you that the rural vote and want to pretend that there are more people in the villages than in the cities. That's not true. They come with those, they are North Korean style margins. Look, even if Biya won every ballot in every rural area, every rural vote, he will end up with 34%. I did this, I did the numbers. I'm a data analyst.
Levy, do you think that on the general spectrum, even beyond the elections, this is the proof or possible proof that the government may be lagging behind on aligning itself with the realities of a changing world?
Exactly. You see, it's clear that the government is not coming to terms with the fact that things are changing. They cannot simply look at themselves in the mirror and agree that the ground has shifted from under their feet. And so that's why you find Minister Momo, another minister, say, oh, why should TCHIROMA be in a haste to announce victory, whereas the masses are in the rural areas talk of all the rural exodus we've been looking at all the time, not to even mention the fact that in conflict-stricken areas of Cameroon, where there's been mass exodus to safer sites, safer cities, and they will come and tell you that there are rural population in Batibo, Indian, Indu, for example, that the people are living in Gi subdivision, and they come and tell you that there the population came out massively when someone from their own camp resigned in Ginicom because he said he couldn't stand the fraud.
Mr. Kube.
Yeah, that he couldn't stand the fraud. So how do people not want to accept change? And it's sad because this corruption comes from top. And we are already beginning to hear that the panic in that camp is coming from the fact that even the president himself is beginning to hold his lieutenants to account and telling them, please, what's happening? Could you for once tell me the truth? Am I losing? Because they are afraid to come and tell him, we are sorry you lost it. That's why they very quickly want to cook what they want to cook, to present it to whoever they want to present. And Elekam shamelessly goes with that. The ground is shifting from under their feet. And I just beg, well, I don't need to beg them, but I just want to send a clear message to these people who stand up to these regimes, who want to support a system that is crumbling and that is failing. They know where they'll end up, in the dustbin of history. In the dustbin of history.
And you are right to say that the CPDM divisional representative from Ginicom, Mr. Kube, resigned from his position with the CPDM because he was scandalized by the difference between the actual number of people who voted and the results that were presented to him in favor of Mr. Biya. We're speaking of about 130 people who came out to vote for 2,421 votes in favor of Mr. Biya. He just couldn't deal with it. He called it a voting miracle or an arithmetical miracle, and he threw in the towel. But tell me,
in the interest of full disclosure, Mr. Maurice Tibam is a former Herald and a former publisher of The Witness. I worked with him in the Herald. So he's my personal friend. I know him.
So you can vouch for his integrity.
Mr. Tabeting, whom we lost briefly, we appreciate you coming back. La question que je m'en vais vous poser, Monsieur Tabeting, c'est pourquoi est-ce que le gouvernement insiste sur le vote rural? Nous avons vu, par exemple, le ministre délégué à la justice sortir après les déclarations de victoire de Monsieur TCHIROMA et dire que nous n'avions pas encore le vote rural. Que vaut vraiment le vote rural sur le vote urbain et métropole au Cameroun?
Madame, je crois que la réponse vient de vous être donnée tout à l'heure par M. Arbor. La réponse est très simple. On n'est plus dans le domaine du fantasme. On est dans le domaine mathématique scientifique. Comprenez, madame? Je crois que la réponse vient de vous être donnée. Jusqu'alors, je pense que peut-être, enfin, j'ose le penser, ils n'ont pas. Et ils ont pensé qu'on allait continuer à faire du verbiage comme d'habitude. Mais là, on est dans le domaine de la science. C'est dur. C'est de la science dure. C'est de la mathématique. C'est pas les commentaires de M. Arbor, de M. Lévy, tout ça là, ou le vôtre, ou des miens. Les chiffres sont là. Et les chiffres viennent même de chez eux. C'est même plus grave que ça. Donc, il n'y a même pas de raison. Je vais vous donner un exemple, madame. Si vous me permettez. En 2018, le président Biya gagne avec à peu près 2 500 000 voix sur 3,5 millions de votants. Et les CAM nous informent que sur les 2,5 millions, il y a 48% qui viennent du septentrion. Ce n'est pas nous, hein? Et ils ont chiffré. De 2018 à 2025, vous savez ce qui s'est passé. Vous savez quelle est la situation du Cameroun. Vous avez vu tout le Nozo. Vous avez vu le septentrion. Vous avez vu l'ensemble du Cameroun. Donc, sur la base de ces éléments, même politiquement parlant, si nous restons toutes choses étant égales par ailleurs, comme on dit en économie, je ne vois pas comment, même dans le meilleur des cas, dans la mesure où il a eu des candidats ressortissants du septentrion, si on fait le calcul même en lui donnant les mêmes voix qu'il a eu en 2018, tout, je fais abstraction à la tricherie. Moi, je dis, on lui donne ça cadeau. Donc, le simple fait qu'il y ait un seul candidat, même un seul candidat, là-bas, il y en avait deux, mais même avec un seul, cela veut simplement dire les 48% dont on nous a parlé en 2018, il ne peut pas les avoir. Or, les chiffres sont là, on sait exactement ce que TCHIROMA a eu dans le septentrion. Donc, même si on lui donnait tout ce qui restait du septentrion, en rajoutant sur ce qui lui reste, il ne pouvait pas avoir 1,5 million voix. Il ne peut même pas.
La question revient sur
après
la victoire.
Je vais conclure sur les zones rurales dont il parle.
Okay.
Donc ces zones rurales-là, il les a déjà. On les lui fait cadeau.
Yeah.
C'est tout.
Okay.
Donc ça n'a aucun impact. Aucun impact, madame. Puisque nous vous disons que 18 départements représentent 80% du corps électoral. Ça, c'est pas nous. C'est pas nous.
En 1992, le père Solomon Tandeng Mouna demande à son fils, le bâtonnier Mouna, vous gagnez et comment vous faites pour défendre...
Vous savez que j'étais autour de la table parce que c'est mon père aussi. Je peux le dire ici. Je n'ai pas peur de le dire. C'est mon père. Donc, le jour où il le demande, nous sommes en Guembou. Nous sommes autour de la table. Donc, j'ai la chance de faire partie de cette famille.
Et comment vous réagissez à ça? Et pour la suite, en 2018, il y a également eu déclaration de victoire de Maurice Kamto. Il paraît qu'en 2025, la question revient encore. Avec les arrestations, la démonisation des opposants, comment faire pour prendre son pouvoir? Le Conseil constitutionnel a une mission claire pour la plupart d'observateurs politiques pensent que le Conseil constitutionnel ne va pas déclarer autre chose que la faveur du candidat Biya. La question revient depuis 1992. Comment prendre son pouvoir si on a gagné l'élection présidentielle et qu'on n'est pas Paul Biya?
Alors, je pense que vous avez donné tout à l'heure une partie de la réponse. Contrairement à 1992, un peu moins en 2018, les réseaux sociaux, la digitalisation, je dirais même l'évolution du numérique a changé complètement la donne. C'est un peu ce que vous disiez tout à l'heure. Cela veut simplement dire ceci. En 2018, lorsque nous avons déclaré la victoire de Maurice Kamto, nous nous fondions sur l'addition des procès-verbaux des commissions départementales qui ont été modifiés. Parce que l'erreur que nous avions faite, c'est que nous, on a attendu la dernière minute pour expliquer au peuple camerounais ce qui se passait. C'est vers la fin. Et le peuple camerounais n'avait pas d'éléments visuels, comme c'est le cas aujourd'hui. Aujourd'hui, non seulement on a, de par la conscientisation, on a amené le peuple camerounais, chacun individuellement, à être directement acteur, madame. Chacun dans le bureau de vote. Moi, je peux vous assurer que ce qui s'est passé dans les bureaux de vote, c'est terrible parce que j'ai jamais vu ça. Chaque électeur se sentait responsable de ce qui se passait. Donc, ceci m'amène conséquemment à dire que ce qui va se passer en 2025 sera totalement différent de ce qui s'est passé en 2018 et encore moins en 1992. Pour la simple raison que cette fois-ci, je ne sais pas, vous vous êtes rendu compte, que ce soit même dans le Nozo, que ce soit dans le Septentrion, que ce soit, ils ont créé les conditions pour que l'ensemble des Camerounais, même en Vomeka, madame, même en Vomeka, ce qui est inédit, même à San-Mélima. Aujourd'hui, cette victoire est revendiquée par l'ensemble des Camerounais, par le peuple camerounais. Ce n'est plus une faction, ce n'est même plus un parti. On ne le fait pas parce qu'on aime beaucoup M. TCHIROMA spécialement, mais il se trouve que chaque Camerounais se sent concerné par cette victoire. C'est ce que je peux vous dire parce que je suis ici, ils peuvent faire ce qu'ils veulent, mais je peux vous assurer, moi je suis à Yaoundé en ce moment, quand vous sortez à Yaoundé en ce moment, les têtes sont baissées. Les gens attendent. Dans les quartiers les plus jeunes, même dans les zones rurales dont il parle là, les gens ont voté pour TCHIROMA. C'est-à-dire dans les fiefs du RDPC, madame. C'est inédit.
Ekine, do you think that generalized anger could be a saving grace for the opposition or the people that are calling for the departure of Mr. Biya? Do you think that this is the thing that could make a major difference in claiming victory and defending victory and coming to power of ISSA-TCHIROMA?
No, it's the anger is visible. But the question is not that people are angry. People have been angry for 43 years. But they say every people get the kind of leadership they deserve. The question is, what do you do with that anger? How do you turn that anger into political capital? The regime is running its playbook as they know it. What they cannot predict is the outcome and the reaction. The circumstances have changed. The context have changed. The degree of internet and social media penetration is different from 1992 and 2018. Public consciousness is also different. The other third factor, Biya's age. Everybody knows that they can visibly see his huskiness in his voice, the carbuncles on his face, the diminished swagger in his gait, the diapers, uncontrollable protracted anal blast in public and in private. The president is enfeebled with all those age-related comorbidities. So the question is, even the soldiers that are backing him or the military that they are using to clamp down on and intimidate and put fear in the population, are they willing to die to maintain a dinosaur in power? Because the people who are out there manifesting and claiming their victory, they have relatives who are in the army, who are in the police, who are in the gendarmes. Those very gendarmes, those very police officers, and those very soldiers, they are the ones who have to pay for those young men who have left school with master degrees and bachelor degrees and they have no jobs. They have to take care of them after they send them to school. So it's not like there is some sector of the country. This is a cataclysm that has been in the making for quite some time. And sooner rather than later, it's going to explode. And when it does, as Maurice Cantor said, les survivants arrangeront le pays après. Or they said, le diable, the Archbishop said what? We have seen words that even the devil takes over après on verra. We cannot see anything worse than what we have given the country for 43 years. So if people, look, the option is simple. Those people are not going to leave power. You got to know that. Yes. Because the system is one of entrenchment and permanence. The people who are sitting in it today, secondly, they have tribalized the presidency. They were telling you that because the political capital is in Yaoundé, the Betis own the country. They are not going to hand over. So the only option they are going to leave it is going to be a bloodbath. People power. There's no other option. You cannot go through civil disobedience or marches on the street. The people power on the streets has to be backed by millions of people. You saw in Burkina Faso, when 1 million people come out and occupy government buildings and say, look, let the military kill all of us. You're not going to kill 1 million people on the streets of Bonaberi, or you're not going to kill 1 million people standing in front of the presidency in a 2D. All what they do is they try to establish.
Nepal.
Yeah, Nepal, you
And
see,
more recently, the uprising in Nepal.
that's the ultimate charm of people power, because when you clamp down, you use these Gestapo tactics to make people disappear, arrest them, intimidate, fear. There comes a time when, look, people just say, we are tired of being suppressed by this jackboot. I stay at home, I die. I go on the street, I die. I have nothing to lose.
In 1992, Frundi was in his Ntarikon residence and boulders were built to stop the military from accessing his residence to arrest him. We see a human shield that has been formed in the northern region of the country in Garua in front of the residence of TCHIROMA this time around. But from a psychological and even ethnical perspective, what is different this time? People blamed the SDF chairman for taking up residence in the northwest instead of bringing the heat to Yaoundé. This time around, we see a similar thing happen where ISSA is in his residence, his native Garwa. Do you think that it is considered a mistake for him to stay there or come to Yaoundé? Does it make any difference in this current crisis?
No, it doesn't.
No.
Let me tell you why the things, why the
I
times
wanted
are
to
different. Let me tell you why the times are different. Frundi was in Bamenda, he was Anglophone. Chiroma has 3 regions, right? And the strategy, what they call strategic mistake of going to Bamenda, I think Mr. Tavising is there. François Senghor, you can remember, he was insisting that Frundi should come to Yaoundé and put the pressure on at the time. The Union for Change, he said, look, the National Vote Counting Committee, they are doing all the tricks in Yaoundé. The embassies are there. If anything happens to you, they will see it. But now it's different. The 2 Anglophone regions have been in insurgency. If you try to do the same thing you did for Chiroma, the 3 northern regions will explode in the streets, will get up into fumes. Now you cannot, as a government, 5 of your 10 provinces are in belligerent revolt against the central administration. And then you remember how many Muslims or Hausa people are there in Briketeri, in Chinga, in Mokolo, in Jean Vespa, in Yaoundé, and they're all over the country. And we are talking about
Levy, do you think that
region where 50%
the
of
northern
your
regions
military
are more easy to radicalize than we've seen
are
in
already,
the northwest, in
radicalized.
or
Yes, I must say that. I must say that. I said it earlier. There is the mindset of the northerner. They are not made. They are made of some separate stuff. They are easily radicalized. I mentioned some historical facts before. They know, they have it in their mindset that their own founding father gave over power willingly to the South, and the South didn't treat them well. The South sidelined and marginalized them, and you see, that's what's happening. That's why you see the revolt is not only with the North. That's why they can't do what they did with Campto. They can't bring up trumped up charges about tribalism. They can't stick that on Chiroma, because Chiroma's hands is open. And like Chrétien was saying, this fever is nationwide. It's not only restricted to those who hail from the North. Chrétien, vous avez dit, c'est une clameur généralisée. On ne sait d'où ça vient, mais la coalition a été répandue sur le territoire, l'ensemble du territoire national. Et malheureusement pour eux, pour ce système, pour ceux des élites inféodés à ce régime, tout a changé, tout bascule. Ils n'ont plus la maîtrise sur la situation, d'où la seule clé de la répression, de l'intimidation et de tout ce qu'ils savent faire, mater les gens, les criminaliser, les diaboliser, pour finir par leur jeter en tôle. Mais je pense honnêtement que cette fois-ci, cela va changer. On ne saurait tromper tout le peuple éternellement. So Angie, the Northerners are made of different stuff. I think it's their socioculture or something in their anthropology that makes them different from us. They're easily radicalized. You don't, it's in their DNA. So once they know that they are being cheated, and imagine if it were not only, and these are 3 regions, Ekine was saying it, that these are, unlike what happened in 1992, here there is a paradigm shift. digitalization, as we say. There is a whole, what they call armée numérique, going behind, wanting to defend the rights of the people, giving information from the polling stations in real time. And that is embarrassing to the regime. That's why the Minister of Interior comes up and says, you see what he does? He cannot quote any law. He cannot quote any law. He says, the President of the Republic said, and I quote, don't play with Cameroon. Another time he says, come and see, back in 2022, Cameroon Tribune said, if you proclaim results, that would be an act of treason. But we are saying, Mr. Minister, we were thinking that you would have some gumption in you to cite the law. C'est que la loi ne défend pas, elle l'autorise. You don't say that. You just want to clamp down on people. So they should be very careful. If I were going to advise them, strange enough, they don't take advice. I'll tell them, you touch the north, the whole of the country goes up in flames.
Vous êtes d'accord avec ce qu'il dit, Monsieur Tabeting?
Non seulement je suis, parce que il a fait allusion à quelque chose de fondamental. C'est-à-dire que le mindset des populations du septentrion,
Oui.
à tort ou à raison, ils étaient dans une logique qui leur faisait avoir un comportement qui stipulait ceci, c'est que non seulement le Nord a transmis le pouvoir au Sud, mais que le Sud a utilisé ce pouvoir contre eux. Et qu'il était tout à fait logique que le pouvoir leur revienne. Ça, il faut avoir ça à l'esprit.
Exactly.
Mais la donne a changé. Parce que même eux ne s'attendaient pas à ce que les choses se passent comme elles se sont passées.
Mais il y a certaines élites du Nord qui parlaient même des réacteurs.
Oui, bien sûr, Aboubacar, Bousmane.
Ouais.
Oui.
Mais il y a aussi la déclaration de Marois de 2002.
Mais il y a la déclaration de Marois. Mais moi, je vous inviterai plus à regarder les 24 pages lorsqu'il démissionne du président TCHIROMA. Lorsqu'il démissionne, il produit 24 pages de réquisitoire sur le régime. C'est 24 pages. À titre personnel, j'ai pris le temps de parcourir ces 24 pages. Donc, en fait, ceci pour dire que quoi? Non, je pense que la donne a changé et qu'au-delà, effectivement, de ce mindset des populations du Grand Nord, et d'ailleurs, j'ai eu la chance personnellement d'en discuter avec le président TCHIROMA ces derniers temps, avant l'élection, puisque depuis l'élection, j'ai pas eu l'occasion de le rencontrer, mais avant l'élection, on a eu plusieurs séances de travail, mais c'était très clair, ça transparaissait dans ce qu'il disait. Ça transparaissait. Donc, j'adhère totalement à la démonstration qu'a faite M. Lévy. Et donc, moi, je suis totalement d'accord avec cette explication. Et je peux même dire que, contrairement à ce que les uns et les autres pensent, je peux vous assurer que je ne suis pas sûr que les choses vont se passer comme le régime le pense. Parce que le peuple s'est approprié de ce combat. Voilà.
Le peuple a vu à travers les réseaux sociaux, les vidéos, les gens étaient beaucoup plus impliqués à cette élection, les électeurs, mais également le peuple a vu la répression. La question que je m'avais vous poser, c'est que pensez-vous que son passage au gouvernement l'a rendu davantage radicalisé après son passage en prison? Parce qu'il est insider, il est le danger que personne ne voit venir. On est préoccupé à barrer la voie à Camto, mais il semble entrer dans le bain assez rapidement. Il comprend le langage populaire, il se connecte facilement avec des gens et son passé récent est plutôt oublié. Vous pensez que, je veux dire, est-ce qu'avec vos conversations que vous avez eues et les informations que vous avez recoupées, vous avez l'impression que son passage au gouvernement l'a davantage radicalisé plutôt?
Alors, j'ai la chance d'avoir rencontré dans les années 2000, au début des années 2000, euh, après un certain nombre d'événements, d'avoir rencontré M. ISSA TCHIROMA. J'ai passé une après-midi dans un restaurant de la place à Paris. Nous étions à trois. J'ai beaucoup discuté avec lui, ça, et avec tout ce qu'il a souffert en prison. Et effectivement, l'orientation que prenait effectivement le régime du renouveau. Bon, je dois vous avouer que c'est quelqu'un de très introverti, mais de mon point de vue, mais qui sait exactement ce qu'il veut. Et je pense que il a fait un travail méthodique depuis qu'il a été sauvé, je dirais, sauvé in extremis, parce que la plupart de ses congénères sont décédés. Vous savez, il a fait 7 ans en prison. Et le problème, c'est que tout être humain, que ce soit vous ou moi, quand on dit qu'il a fait 7 ans en prison, non, il ne faut pas le dire ainsi. Je ne sais pas si on vous a déjà décrit, parce qu'il a eu l'occasion, à l'époque, lorsque je l'ai rencontré à Paris, au restaurant, on en parlait en rigolant. À l'époque, il s'en était sorti, mais il expliquait comment est-ce qu'il a souffert tout ce qu'il a subi en prison. Je pense que beaucoup de gens en parlent comme si c'était une anecdote, mais humainement parlant, je pense que vous pouvez imaginer, lorsqu'on est amené à être un être humain et de subir ce qu'il a subi, ça laisse une trace pour toute sa vie. Et je m'amuse en ce moment lorsque je discute avec un certain nombre de collègues et je leur rappelle, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de jeunes sur la scène politique, je rappelle à certains jeunes, je leur dis, de tous les hommes politiques encore en vie, je dis bien de tous les hommes politiques encore en vie et encore sur la scène, personne n'a subi ce que TCHIROMA a subi, humainement parlant.
Ekine, you want to add something to that?
I want to ask a question. Est-ce que cela ne donne pas raison aux gens, surtout les bêtis ou bien les gens du gouvernement qui disent tout sauf TCHIROMA, parce qu'ils voient peut-être la vengeance.
He's coming for revenge.
Que quelqu'un d'autre peut-être tout sauf lui, parce que bon, vous-même vous avez dit que ça a laissé une trace.
Moi, je ne partage pas cette information. Moi, je ne partage pas cette opinion. Pourquoi?
Cette analyse, cette conclusion.
Oui, cette conclusion. Lui, voilà. Lui, il a une politique fédératrice. Donc, lui, il entend unir autour de lui toute la nation, de quelque chapelle que ce soit. Donc, il veut qu'on pense les blessures du passé.
Exactement, exactement. Plus jamais ça.
Oui, plus jamais ça. Lui-même, il a été victime des turpitudes politiques de son temps. Et il dit ceci.
Je parlais des gens du LDPC qui les contrecarrent maintenant.
Non, les gens.
So you're saying that he's trying to dismantle the system that broke him and thrives on tribalism and separatism.
Oui, mais ils ne réussiront pas. Ils ne pourront jamais réussir. Pourquoi? Sauf s'ils font ce qu'ils ont l'habitude de faire, mater le peuple, voler la volonté populaire. Mais je suis convaincu que TCHIROMA, bon, personne ne le voyait venir. On croyait que ça allait être à la Camto, hein? Mais sauf que sa stratégie a surpris tout le monde. Lui, il dit, écoutez, mes chers compatriotes, moi, j'ai été au sein du système. Pendant mon séjour à la communication, j'ai dû prononcer des paroles qui vous ont blessé. S'il vous plaît, pardonnez-les-moi. Il a dit, je ne suis qu'un instrument entre les mains du Créateur. Je n'ai jamais été touché par une telle humilité. On ne le voit pas dans l'autre camp. On voit l'arrogance, on voit l'intimidation, on voit la diabolisation des opposants. Mais Chiroma dit, je suis surpris moi-même par la coalition que le peuple construit autour de ma modeste personne. Il dit, je m'allais à Dakar, je me rendais à Dakar pour m'incliner devant la tombe de notre premier président. La route m'a été barrée. Mais il vient avec toute une autre politique, tout un autre agenda. Il dit de sa propre bouche, j'ai un programme de 3 à 5 ans pour refonder, pour repenser, pour reconstruire l'appareil étatique, que ce soit sur le plan stratégique ou sur le plan opérationnel, politique, humanitaire. Donc, il ne sera pas comme les autres. Donc, lui-même, en pensant les blessures, ça veut dire lui-même de l'intérieur, il a pardonné à tous ceux qui lui ont fait du mal. Parce que les affres qu'il a vécues dans ces années d'incarcération, vraiment, c'est inimaginable.
Ekene, question to you. He wants to be in power for a transition period. He wants to be the transition president, 3 to 5 years. In the Central African sub-region, do you believe that a president will come? Apart from exceptions like Tanon of Bibin, do you think a president will really come and spend only 3 to 5 years and leave if it's not a cas of force majeure?
Well, as we say, politics, you campaign in prose, you govern in poetry, right? The transitional mandate is something that was politically appealing, and that gave Cameroonians one other reason to rally behind him. He didn't just say it will be 3 years, he said we'll bring back the presidential mandate back to 5 years. Those are some of the things that would try to engender some maybe energy into the system, because right now the system is stuck in paralysis. A president who is in power for a presidential mandate of 7 years, that's almost the whole American presidential mandate for 2 terms. So, yes, those things were politically appealing. In 1997, ISSA Vodo came to the UNDP convention in Gaundere and asked the opposition to make him their single opposition candidate. He gave himself 2 years. He said something, said only a Betty man can remove Biya from power the way they have built the system. He said, if d'abord, il vient là-bas en Bruce au sud, et il vient nous dire quoi à Yaoundé. Moi, je suis un patriarche d'un fou.
Monsieur Tabeting,
je ne suis pas dans la forêt. So if you think Chiroma is going to backpedal on his promises, he himself has to think about the history of the moment. But I think we'll cross that bridge when we get there, because everything is now digitalized, archived, and publicly known. So people will hold him to his promises. If he says at the end of 5 years, I don't think he'll be getting to, by then he'll be about what, 82? I don't think he wants to go through this diaper wearing situation where we have an effigy, a picture running for president of a 93-year-old man.
Mr. Tabeting, in the words of ISSA Voto, only a Betty man can remove Biya from power. But the center southeast are also very impoverished and enclaved. Less than 5% of the population lives in opulence or even in comfort above the poverty line. Has the government not weaponized these political slogans to keep them in chains? What would make such a dignitary say such a thing?
Le gouvernement actuel a d'autres préoccupations. C'est de se maintenir au pouvoir.
That's it.
Yeah.
Honnêtement. Et tout ce que ce gouvernement a fait de 2018 à 2025, c'est quelle stratégie adopter pour se maintenir au pouvoir. Les questions qui concernent ne serait-ce que l'économie, le social, l'éducation, la santé et tout, sont des questions très secondaires pour ce gouvernement. Donc, il m'est très difficile. Je viens de publier un livre dont le titre est « Sauver le Cameroun », où j'explique et je me base sur les chiffres de ce gouvernement pour expliquer à quel point ce gouvernement a mis notre pays dans une situation inextricable. C'est-à-dire que
Cameroonians have allowed this for 43 years. I mean, when you look at a case like Zimbabwe and the late Mugabe, who was forced out of power in 2017 after close to 40 years, he had a stronger claim because he was a 1970s to 80s revolution fighter, freedom fighter. But Mr. Biya was just given power on a platter of gold. How do you explain that Cameroonians have tolerated the suffering for 43 years and counting?
They have been anesthetized.
Yes, I was going to say that as well.
there
is some general anesthesia, and that's why the ruling class is kind of lucky, I should say.
And they're counting on that to continue.
They count on that, like, oh, we are peace-loving. You put water in the mouth of Cameroonians, you go to the farm, you come back and meet the water in their mouth. You could do this to them, you could beat them, lock them up, and they never say anything. They adapt. You could raise prices. You could torture them. There has been this divide, the mismatch between the elite and the suffering masses. There's been the tyranny of the minority, of the ruling minority, and they have been doing that and getting away with it. Like Chrétien said, you can't have a ruling class whose only agenda is how to stay in power, how to keep power, influence, wealth, and the masses are suffering. And the way the political machination of the ruling class is that they try to spread it around. They politicize every designation, every appointment. Like, okay, you know what? There is nobody from that part. We appoint one kingpin there who would appoint appendages across the place, and that's how they lull us into sleep. That's how, like Ekene said, they anesthetize us. The only bad thing, as I said, that's happening to them is that every drug has an expiry date. Even the drug they've been using on Cameroonians has come to its expiry date, and that's something they didn't understand. They go, they come, they pump in some injection, and they know that Cameroonians live not in poverty, in abject poverty. So they exploit the abject poverty. They go with few bank notes and they make them sleep. They give them 2,000 francs. They give them with a loaf of bread and sardine. But then they are beginning to understand that even that drug, the drug called bread and sardine, has an expiry date. And that expiry date is now.
Monsieur Tabeting, vous pensez que la misère ambiante au Cameroun a permis au régime de se maintenir au pouvoir pendant 43 ans?
Ben, écoutez, l'histoire du monde le prouve. C'est pas une spécificité camerounaise, hein. C'est-à-dire qu'en général, plus on maintient les gens dans la misère, je prends toujours cet exemple. Imaginez quelqu'un qui vous maintient dans le désert et vous assoiffe, et un matin se lève et vous met une goutte d'eau dans la bouche. Mais c'est comme s'il vous sauvait. À ce moment-là, c'est comme s'il était votre Dieu. Alors, c'est cette même personne qui vous a confiné dans le désert en vous assoiffant. C'est-à-dire, attend le moment le plus long et vous met une petite goutte dans la bouche.
Le pompier pyromane.
Exact. Et d'ailleurs, même, d'aucuns disent parfois que c'est le truc de Stockholm. Donc, moi, je dis tout simplement que... Hein?
Stockholm syndrome.
De Stockholm. Donc, on est dans une situation où le monde entier, personne ne comprend ce qui se passe au Cameroun. Vous avez des intellectuels, regardez-vous ce que vous faites dans le monde. Vous êtes partout dans le monde. Moi, j'ai fait toute ma vie professionnelle en Europe. De là où j'étais, je n'étais pas, peut-être, j'étais pas le dernier. Et ils sont nombreux comme ça. Mais quand on revient tous au Cameroun, les gens se demandent, mais qu'est-ce qui vous arrive?
Vous Vous pensez que
Oui.
le report de la proclamation des résultats est lié à ces sorties pro-RDPC, pro-Biya de ces 3 derniers jours et ces arrestations et ces démonisations des opposants et ces fabrications de fausses preuves pour démonter le mouvement de l'opposition avant la proclamation des résultats?
Je ne sais pas s'ils sont en mesure de démonter le mouvement de l'opposition, mais ce que je sais, c'est que ce report est la preuve même que ce qu'ils s'apprêtent à dire, c'est une forfaiture. C'est la preuve même, d'ailleurs, que c'est une forfaiture. Dans la mesure où toutes les arrestations, toutes les dispositions militaires qui sont prises sur l'ensemble du territoire national, c'est pas de nature, effectivement, à laisser le Cameroun en liesse face à une victoire méritée, si je puis me permettre. Donc, eux-mêmes, ils reconnaissent, c'est de manière implicite, je dirais même plus explicite d'ailleurs, plus explicite que le résultat qu'ils vont donner, ce n'est pas le bon résultat. D'où toutes les mesures qui sont prises. Donc moi, il n'y a pas de doute dessus. Le peuple n'est pas dupe. Et je ne suis pas sûr que toutes ces manigances, toutes ces arrestations vont faire en sorte que le peuple puisse croire en ce qu'ils vont faire. Non, au contraire. Moi, je vois les gens dans la rue ici, personne ne croit. Tout le monde est unanime.
Dans ce contexte, M. Travessi, parlons-nous de le jour après lundi.
Before we get to that, we're going to get there. Was this a desperate move? Do you think that the government was taken aback by the movements that are going on, the anti-Biya protests going on, and was postponing the proclamation of results to buy some time to fabricate some false proof to cast doubt on his victory claim?
I think they were just trying to not really to buy time. Their strategy has always been to gaslight the public and then come up and run their playbooks in terms of pretending that there was some kind of a constitutional process and the electoral process went through it. So if you accept to run in a rigged system, then you have to accept the outcome. Now, I wanted to mention this idea which we touched briefly, because they always talk about, when I see would made that statement and the way the Betty people always react whenever they feel that they have grip on power is threatened. They said, well, yeah, they might be suffering. En tout cas, c'est notre type qui est là. Nous sommes le pays organisateur. We have heard all kinds of things that they say about why they have to support the regime even though they are suffering.
So they are maintained in an illusion of having power for themselves, whereas it's just an elite that have it.
It is just an elite. And this elite have captured the state. It's a vampire elite that have captured the state. Because, look, it's not just only the Betty people who are in power. All the Anglophone CPDM elite are part of that system. You see, the only time that system would unravel is when Biya is no longer there, because everything revolves around him. Until people power now would rise up and say, let's throw the bombs out. We've had enough of this national necrosis. You know. So they might, I don't think that, I think a more plausible explanation would be that the soldiers had not gotten in time to the cities that they wanted to militarize. So they needed to buy time to send the soldiers maybe to Chang, to Bafusam, to Marwa, to Kumba, to Bamenda, and all those other places. The soldiers were still on their way to get there. But again, they can hide behind the cloak of it because it's still within the 15-day electoral legal metrics. So you have 15 days to announce the results. But I don't need to remind you, in 1992, it took them 2 months.
2 months.
2 months to proclaim the results of the 1992 presidential elections. It took them 2 months.
Let me.
That was a slip. That was a
you know,
slip of the tongue. That
And
was a
this
slip of, that was an interesting slip of the tongue. You said it took them 2 months to rig or to read.
not to read.
To read and to read. Yeah.
No, you see now this one on Monday is nobody surprised on Monday. They have sent out the invitations already. You have seen them. But then we said
but before Monday,
you are going there to eat. That's what they're going to do there, to eat and drink.
Before Monday, we have Sunday, where Mr. Chiroma has called for massive protests around the country, but also in the diaspora. And after declaring this, a few hours later, we've seen what happened. The regime moved quickly to arrest his main allies, possibly in a bid to kill the momentum. What do you have to say about that, Mr. Mbushu? What do you think will happen tomorrow?
What I think would happen tomorrow is that that momentum will not be killed, that it will be followed from the within and without, in Cameroon and in the diaspora. And I wanted to add something, some very important parameter to ISSA Chiroma's call for protest. He said a call for peaceful protests. He calls for peaceful protests. Peaceful protest. And well, if I were to take any political stance, that's what I'll tell the people. And that all these arrests and these arrests by the system becoming the hoodlum to smash and squash the people because they want to express their idea, I think I'll just say that it should be, I think, something that Martin Luther King said at the time of the activism that he carried out in America in his day, was that he said, again and again, we must rise to the majestic height of meeting physical force with soul force. And that's what's happening across. We find in some places the army and the military feeling the pain, aligning with the people. We saw something that happened in Chang. One military officer came and tried to brutalize the people and was violent on them. Another one came, gathered the people and spoke to them in a calm manner, that when you go and you destroy the roads, don't you think that road doesn't belong to any political party? It belongs to us all. And you see that there is that appeal. And in some way, that speaks to the mind and the soul of the people. So my take is that there would be the attempt, as usual, by all of these people and these institutions that pay homage, that are subservient to the system, that serve the regime and not the people. They would want to squash them. But then non-violence is what we all advocate. And I trust that that is what would happen tomorrow.
Monsieur
in
Tabeti,
and out of the country.
qu'est-ce qu'il faut anticiper pour demain, la date de après l'annonce des manifestations massives sur toute l'étendue du territoire par ISSA Chiroma? Il dit également connaître très bien le régime. Vous pensez qu'il y aurait des contre-manifestations ou bien des personnes, des renseignements payés pour créer des événements violents pour l'accuser d'insurrection et le traîner au tribunal militaire, ou bien vous pensez que tout va se dérouler dans la paix et il y aura effectivement une sortie en masse de la population?
Non, je pense qu'avec ce régime et compte tenu de leur détermination, il ne faut pas se faire d'illusions. Ils ne vont pas, malgré l'appel à une protestation pacifique, ils ne vont pas se laisser faire. Ils ne l'ont jamais accepté, donc c'est pas demain qu'ils vont l'accepter. Donc il faut s'attendre à toutes les manigances de la part du régime, c'est-à-dire les infiltrations et même des provocations. Il faut s'y attendre. Il faut s'y attendre. Mais qu'à cela ne tienne, il va falloir que le peuple tienne bon et tout dépendra un peu de la masse, ce que j'appellerais la masse critique qui sera dans la rue pour pouvoir effectivement les faire reculer, comme on a vu dans d'autres villes. Moi, je pense que non, ils ne vont pas laisser faire. Donc, il faut rien attendre d'eux de ce côté-là. Ils sont déterminés, ils sont dans une logique, je dirais,
Ekine, what to expect? We've seen traditional rulers, we've seen territorial administration authorities, officials, we've seen government ministers come out and say, stay home, come out and say, you're not allowed to have a gathering of more than 5 people. What do you anticipate could happen tomorrow?
2 things, 2 points here. The first one is what Levy said. It sounded to me like an oxymoron, peaceful protest, within the context of a regime where for you to organize the right to peaceful assembly is enshrined in the Constitution, but you need a permit from a chef or a divisional officer or the administrative authorities to organize a meeting. Even in your own private home, you are not allowed to meet. They will come and tell people to leave. We have seen the government disrupt meetings in private homes that are not even within the public sphere. So the fact that those meetings will be quote unquote illegal is already putting the 2 sides on a collision course. Now, the second part of it is, it can sound like a dress rehearsal for the regime to know what the reaction will be after the Constitutional Council proclaims Biya the winner. The size of the turnout, the energy on the streets, the demonstration of people power, it will tell the regime that, look, this time will be different. So it is a dress rehearsal for what is going to happen after Monday. So if the population is intimidated and they say, well, they didn't come out, then the regime will win. That's why they are militarizing the whole country. But if the people came out in defiance, because that's what the democracy is all about, no regime, however ancient, can always imprison the truth forever. The time of reckoning has come. And it has come through the ballot. But if it has to be defended with the sound of gunfire than with the roar of people's consciences, then so be it.
Levy, Monday, the Constitutional Council plans to proclaim the official results. In the last presidential election, even when it was exposed by Alafoge, who is currently in detention for reasons only the regime can seem to explain, he exposed 32 result slips of vote tally sheets that were cooked in favor of the Biya regime, and still they went forward and proclaimed him as winner. Do you expect a different outcome on Monday?
No, but I don't expect the same
response,
aloofness from the people. And even the people who did that, they know that this time around, that lie is not going to, they are not going to ram it down our throats. They know. Of course, they'll do the same thing, because we are all taken aback when we find Elecam, the organ that's supposed to manage elections, they sit and then they receive grave allegations, I should say, of malpractice by their own staff. Up in Makari, we hear that there was someone, an Elecam official, who's confessed to having received 30 million francs to falsify, to alter results, and nothing is being done. Elecam is not seen to investigate all these things. So what would change? We have institutions that lack credibility. The people have no trust in them. And then, so we don't expect anything to change. Of course, that I know. They would want to ram it down the throats of Cameroonians. But then one thing I am certain of is things are never going to be the same again. The people as one entity is rising up to stand for its rights. Like Martin Luther King said, no dogs, no water hoses would turn them around. Then I think in this time, no amount of the clubs and bullets and machetes would turn down the will of the people. Let's wait and see. We wait, we watch, we pray.
Final word from Ekine.
Prayers will not do it, baby. It's courage and action, and the refusal that their voices will not be silenced.
Exactly.
Can Cameroon escape a popular revolt?
That is
Can
what
Cameroon
No.
have?
it is sleepwalking into one inadvertently
Yeah.
because of the government's actions and inactions. The geometry of
Gentlemen, it's
history, it bends towards justice. So those people who are calling for calm and peace, there can be no peace without justice.
Ekine and Levy, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you. We didn't see the time go by because of the current context, which is burning. Cameroon is in a post-electoral crisis, which the government is struggling to admit, even though it is cracking down on all its main political adversaries or main allies to ISSA CHIROMA, who has declared himself winner based off on the valid proof of the 18 main divisions of the country with the most weighty population or voting population density. He has also announced a call on Cameroonians to go out in mass and protest tomorrow as from 3 p.m. to defend their vote and the victory of the people. The men who have been arrested, Parfait Mvoum, who happens to be the president of the Mouvement Républicain, a one-time SDF official, as well as Anissa Ekane, the president of the Manidem, who is known as a freedom fighter in Cameroon, who was in jail in the 80s for his political convictions, as well as Jokam Chameni, also known for his political convictions, also jailed by the Biya regime for 5 years. It was one of the first Cameroonians, or the first Cameroonians in Central Africa to assemble a computer. And his business was destroyed by the Biya regime due to repression as a result of his political beliefs. But we also have Fabrice Lena, the campaign manager of Ateki Seta Caxton, who ran for president as well through his weight behind Bello Buba. Fabrice Lena, since the presidential election, has been stating ISSA CHIROMA won the election. In fact, it was during a conversation or a program when he declared ISSA had won. Minutes later, he was picked up. And so the government is definitely being true to itself, the police state that it is, the crackdown on opposition leaders, the demonization, the framing in order to take them to the military courts and to try them under martial law is what we are seeing unfold. The same way we saw these things in the 90s, but also in 2018, where Maurice Kamto claimed victory, was thrown behind bars for close to a year after unveiled threats by the Minister of the Interior, who still is this time around again making threats and also executing them. We also remember a member of parliament was executed this week, a CPDM MP for the Ako Misaje constituency. The abductors had asked for a ransom of 15 million francs. He was unfortunately not able to come up with that. The government has remained tight-lipped, although 2 days after his execution, the president of the National Assembly had come out to extend condolences to his family. We've not heard clear circumstances from the government or any statement from the government spokesperson, who in the meantime has come out to call on journalists to be actors of peacekeeping. It's on that note, ladies and gentlemen, Angie Forbin was here. I'm available. Catch me on Facebook and Angie Forbin Live, and the handle is the same on YouTube. Until then, be safe out there, because really, indeed, we live in dark times, and these are the times where Cameroonians are being asked by ISSA CHIROMA to come out and defend their vote. Bye-bye.